In this lecture, we will apply the idea of opportunity cost, trade-offs, and efficiency vis-a-vis the PPF to understand why nations may trade with each other. The big point to keep in mind is that when two countries voluntarily engage in trade, it must be because trade is mutually beneficial. And that's one thing that we will drive towards in this lecture. Now, how does trade take place? We will see that the critical idea which drives trade is differences in opportunity cost. In this lecture, we'll see how to calculate opportunity costs and then how to use that as the basis for trade. Before we get into the analysis of basis for trade, let's make some simplifying assumptions. What we will assume is that our world consists of two countries, two goods, and one input, which we will assume is labor. The cost of a good is embodied in the amount of labor used to produce each good. What that means is that if a good needs more labor, that good will be more costly because workers are paid their wages, and that is what the cost of production of that good would be. Now, how much labor is used to produce each good is what we define as technology. And to keep things simple, we'll also assume that each country has a fixed amount of labor. So given this, let us look at the example of two countries, US and India, and let's consider two goods, wheat and computers. Let's also assume that US has 600 hours of workers available, whereas India has 800 hours of workers available. The table given here gives us the technology. So in the US, we need 10 hours of labor to produce 1 unit of wheat, and we need 30 hours of labor to produce 1 unit of computers. In India, 20 hours are needed to make 1 unit of wheat, and 40 hours are needed to make 1 unit of computers. Given this, we can also define the limits of PPF. Now remember, PPF is a production possibilities frontier. It captures the maximum amount of each of the goods a country can make given its resources. So if US devotes all of its labor towards wheat, we get 60 units of wheat. If we devote all of our resources towards computers, we get 600 divided by 30, which is 20 units of computers. On the other hand, for India, if they devote all their resources towards wheat, they get 40 wheat. If they devote all their resources to computers, they will get 20 computers. The PPF will join these 2 points for each country, and any point in between will give us the combination of wheat and computers that fully uses all of the nation's resources. So for example, here we have three different intermediary points. If US devotes everything to computers, we get 20 computers. Devote everything to wheat, we get 60 wheat. And then similarly, we get the PPF boundaries for India as well. Autarky is defined as no trade. So let's assume that each country devotes half of its resources to either of the goods. If US does that, we have 600 hours of work. We divide 300 for computers and we allocate 300 for wheat. We get 30 units of wheat, and we get 10 units of computers. On the other hand, in India, they get 20 units of wheat and 10 units of computers. These two combinations are efficient, they're optimal because they're on the PPF. And we can capture them by basically circling the midpoint of each PPF. So let's assume that in no trade, this is the production as well as the consumption point for each of these countries. Now, given the way we have set this up, will there be any trade between India and US? Well, US can make both wheat and computers with less workers, which means that both of these goods will cost less in the US. And they will cost more in India if we look at just the amount of labor required to make these things. So it seems on the face of it, there is no basis for trade between these two countries. There's nothing that US can really get cheaper from in India. Or is that true? So why trade? But as we said before, trade is not based on absolute advantage. Trade is based on the idea of comparative advantage. And let's unpack this in more detail. So here we have written down each of these goods of how much they have to give up of the other good to get this good. For example, in the US, if we want to get computers, we have to give up workers from the production of wheat. If we make wheat, we have to give up workers in the production of computers. So the opportunity cost of wheat in the US is 1/3 computer. US needs 10 workers or 10 hours to make one wheat. US needs 30 hours to make one computer. What this means is that 1 unit of wheat costs 1/3 computers in the US. So we see that due to the differences in technology, both India and US have differing opportunity costs. For instance, in the US, opportunity cost of one wheat is 1/3 computers. In India, the opportunity cost of one wheat is 1/2 computers. Now, this difference in opportunity cost provides us a basis for trade. So if US can produce and sell wheat for a price greater than 1/3 computers, US producers of wheat will be happy. On the other hand, if Indian consumers can buy wheat for a price less than 1/2 of computers, they will be happy. So as long as we can come up with an intermediary price which is acceptable to US producers of wheat and Indian consumers of wheat, there will be a basis for trade. One such possible free trade price could be that one wheat trades for 2/5 computers. On the other hand, we can look at the price of computers by flipping this ratio. The price of one computer would be 5/2 wheat. US consumers can now purchase computers cheaper than at home. They were paying 3 wheat to get one computer. Now they're paying 2.5 wheat to get one computer. At this price, Indian producers of computers are also happy. They can sell computers at a higher price than what they were doing before. Domestically, they were selling a computer for 2 wheat. In the foreign markets, they can sell a computer for 2.5 wheat. So US consumers of computers are happy because they can get computers at a cheaper price. Indian producers of computers are happy because they can now sell these computers at a higher price. Now let's say at this price, US exports 10 wheat. If they export 10 wheat, given the opportunity cost, they can use that to buy 4 computers. So US exports are 10 wheat and 4 computers. These 4 computers become India's exports, and the 10 wheat become India's imports. Let us now examine the production and consumption of both wheat and computers for both these countries. We see that we are still devoting half our resources towards wheat and half towards computers in both these countries. So with that, production of computers in US is 10 and production of wheat is 30 units of wheat. Then US is exporting 10 units of wheat and importing 4 computers. So US consumption of wheat now is 20 and their consumption of computers goes up to 14. Similarly for India, the production is 20 wheat and 10 computers. India exports 4 computers, imports 10 wheat. The consumption of wheat now in India is 30 units and the consumption of computers is 6 computers. Are these countries better off with this trade? To see this, let's plot these points on the PPF. If US were to produce and consume at this level, our production would still be on the PPF. However, US consumption would be at a point above the PPF. We are consuming 30 wheat and 6 computers. And this point, marked by an X, lies outside of the PPF. This consumption point is not possible given the technology, how much labor US has, and US's PPF. Plotting the consumption point on India's PPF, we see that India's consumption of 30 wheat and 6 computers marked with an X is outside of the PPF. So even though their production is within the PPF, their consumption with trade goes beyond the PPF. This point would not have been possible in a no trade situation. Similarly, for the US consumption is now at 20 wheat and 14 computers. And this point also would have not been possible for the US without trade. So we see that what trade has done is it has enabled both these countries to consume outside of their PPF. This is a point that was not achievable in a no trade situation. Now here we assumed that both these countries are operating with dividing half of their workers in each of these two goods. But because the opportunity cost of production does not change with how much production of computers or wheat takes place, both these countries could specialize in the good in which they have the comparative advantage. In this case, US would completely specialize in wheat, and India would completely specialize in computers. And they could, in theory, export all of that good to get the other good. So if we plot these lines, the red line is what we call the consumption possibilities frontier. If US were to produce only wheat, we would get 60 units of wheat. If we export all of that at the world price, then US can potentially import 24 units of computers. On the other hand, India, if they only produce computers and export all of them, they can buy 50 units of wheat. So for both India and the US, we see that the consumption's possibilities frontier lies outside of the production's possibilities frontier. So specialization and trade based on comparative advantage has the implication of letting a country go beyond and outside of its PPF. So we have seen that trade in this case is welfare enhancing because it is letting each of these countries go beyond what they could have afforded in the absence of any trade.